They tied my hands behind my back and stuffed a cloth in my mouth. I was naked. I was bleeding. I was screaming, but nobody could hear me. I was trapped in the church toilet, shaking, crying, and praying that anyone would save me. It was my pastor. The same man who prayed over our wedding just 2 weeks ago. And my father-in-law. The man who gave a speech and blessed me during our reception. They locked the door. They laughed as I cried. They took turns hurting me. My eyes rolled back from the pain. I collapsed. My blood mixed with my tears on the floor. I begged God to kill me. And then I heard footsteps. My husband. He pushed the door open with force. He saw everything. The rope. My blood. His father. His pastor. Me. His eyes turned red. His hands shook. And then, what he did next made me fall in love with him forever. But what followed? That moment changed my life forever. I met Daniel when I was 22. I was a final-year university student. He was already working as an accountant in a bank. He used to send me lunch surprise flowers and call my name like it was music. "Angel," he would say. "You're the reason I breathe." We fell in love fast. Too fast. His father, Mr. James, was a retired Army officer turned businessman. He was tough, serious, and rarely smiled. The first time I met him, he only asked one question. "Are you a virgin?" I was shocked. I stammered. Daniel laughed it off and said, "Daddy just wants to be sure I'm safe." The pastor of our church, Pastor Kelvin, was a tall, smooth-talking man. His words felt like honey, but his eyes always made me uncomfortable. Even on our wedding day when he hugged me, his hand stayed on my waist too long. I noticed. But I ignored it. We had a big, beautiful wedding. People danced. My parents were proud. And for those 2 weeks after, I thought I had found peace. I thought I had married into a godly, strong family. I thought Pastor Kelvin was a man of God. I thought Mr. James was old but wise. But that night, Daniel was out on a work trip. He told me he'd be gone for 3 days. His family house was big. That's where we were staying temporarily till our own apartment was ready. My husband's father lived there too. On the second night, around 10 p.m., Mr. James knocked on my door. "Your pastor wants to see you in church," he said. "Now?" I asked, confused. "Yes. It's important." He said, "It's about your womb." I froze. I had just started feeling weird cramps that week. I hadn't even told Daniel. But I believed him. I followed Mr. James to the church. When we entered, the entire church was dark. Only the small light in the toilet section was on. "Go inside," Mr. James ordered. As soon as I stepped in, Pastor Kelvin was waiting. The door slammed behind me. Mr. James entered. I knew I was in danger, but it was too late. They dragged me to the ground. Pastor Kelvin slapped me. "Don't scream," he said. Mr. James tied my hands behind me. My wrapper was ripped off. I screamed, "Please, please. I'm your son's wife." Pastor Kelvin spat on me. "I warned Daniel not to marry you." I begged. I cried. I told them I was on my period. I told them I was pregnant. Elite. Anything to stop them. But they didn't care. I felt pain in places I never knew existed. I kicked. I bit. I hit my head against the toilet wall just to knock myself out. I collapsed in blood. And then, that sound. Footsteps. I tried to scream. My voice was gone. The door banged open. Daniel stood there. He saw everything. He saw his wife naked, tied, bleeding. He saw his father half-dressed. He saw his pastor zipping up. He didn't speak. He dropped his bag and picked up a chair. Without saying a word, he swung it. It landed on Pastor Kelvin's back. Bones cracked. He dragged his father by the throat and slammed his head into the wall. I watched in shock, in pain, in love. But that moment when Daniel pulled a knife out of his bag, that was when I knew something darker was coming. Daniel raised the knife in his hand. His chest was rising fast. His eyes didn't blink. His lips were dry. For a moment I thought he didn't recognize me anymore. "Daniel," I whispered through bloody lips. He didn't hear me. He turned to Pastor Kelvin first. "Stand up," Daniel growled. The pastor was crawling. Blood was already dripping from his nose where the chair hit him. Daniel grabbed him by the collar. "You touched my wife?" he barked. "You tied my wife and touched her?" Pastor Kelvin started crying. "It was the devil," he said. "It wasn't me. It was a temptation. I'm sorry. Forgive me." Daniel didn't blink. He took the knife and stabbed it through the pastor's thigh. The scream echoed through the church walls. I shivered. Blood spurted onto the tiles. He didn't stop. Another stab. And another. The pastor passed out. Then Daniel turned to his father. "Dad," he whispered. "You?" Mr. James was shaking. Son, I can explain." "You tied my wife?" Daniel rushed at him like a lion. He didn't use the knife. He used his fists. Blow after blow. Hit after hit. Until Mr. James collapsed beside the toilet sink. Then Daniel broke the ropes and carried me into his arms. I was faint. My body was wet with blood and shame. He kissed my forehead. "I'm so sorry," he whispered. "I should have never left you." He carried me to the car, wrapped me in a towel and drove straight to a private clinic. I was unconscious most of the way, but I heard him shouting at nurses when we arrived. "Treat her now. If she dies, you all die too." I woke up after surgery. There were bandages between my thighs. My lips were cracked. My head pounded. Daniel was beside me holding my hand. "I love you," he said, his voice broken. I wept. I couldn't even speak. I just nodded. Later that evening, 2 police officers came into the hospital room. "Sir," one of them said to Daniel, "we found your father. He's alive, but he's in a coma." Daniel didn't react. Pastor Kelvin didn't make it. He bled out before help arrived. Silence. The officers looked around. "We'll need to take a statement. But since it was self-defense, we may be able to help you." Daniel just looked at me. "I'd do it again," he said softly. And that was the beginning. But it was not the end. Daniel's family turned against him. His mother came to the hospital 2 days later. She didn't hug me. She didn't ask how I was. She just stood at the door and shouted, "You killed your father." Daniel stood up. "He's not dead, Mum. You tried to kill him. You killed your pastor. You've destroyed our name." "He destroyed himself when he touched my wife." She slapped Daniel. Then she looked at me with disgust. "You brought a curse into this family," she hissed. "Since you came, everything has fallen apart." Tears rolled down my cheeks. I wanted to run. But Daniel pulled me close and said, "She's my wife. And if you ever insult her again, you'll never see me again." His mother stormed out. For the first time in days I felt safe. I felt loved. But pain doesn't end so easily. The church made headlines. "Pastor dies in church toilet scandal." Members protested. Some called for Daniel's arrest. Others blamed me. Fake stories started spreading. That I seduced them. That I was a Jezebel. That I sacrificed the pastor for wealth. We lost friends. Daniel lost his job. He got arrested once. But after long questioning, they let him go. "I'd go to prison for you," he told me. But that didn't make it easier. We moved to a small one-room apartment. I couldn't walk properly for months. I had nightmares. I couldn't stand mirrors. I hated my body. I felt broken. One night I tried to take my life. I drank bleach when Daniel went to buy food. When he returned, he found me on the floor, foaming. He screamed. He cried. He held me. He poured palm oil down my throat. He slapped my face to wake me. That night, he slept on the hospital bed beside me and held my hand. "Don't leave me," he said. "Please don't leave me." And I didn't. I fought. For him. For us. But life didn't stop there. 2 months later, I discovered I was pregnant. We didn't know whose it was. Daniel stared at the test strip for hours. Then he kissed my belly and said, "This is ours. No matter what." But life had another twist waiting. On the day of my scan, I collapsed in the hospital hallway. The nurse screamed. Daniel rushed in. There was blood again. So much blood. More than I had ever seen. They wheeled me into emergency. And when I woke up, the doctor stood beside my bed and said, "We lost the baby." I didn't cry when the doctor said I lost the baby. I just stared at the ceiling. I was empty. Like my womb. like my soul. Nothing was left inside me. Daniel sat on the floor beside the hospital bed. His face was in his palms. He didn't say a word. He didn't even look at me. He just wept like a child. Silently. That silence hurt more than the miscarriage. Later that night he came close, kissed my forehead and whispered, "I'm sorry. I couldn't protect you or our child." I didn't respond. I couldn't. I hated everything, myself, my body, my life. I felt cursed. I spent 3 days in the hospital. I didn't eat. I didn't bathe. Nurses begged. Daniel begged. Nothing changed. I just lay there remembering everything, how it started in that toilet. The blood, the ropes, the pastor's voice, Mr. James' breath on my neck. I wanted to die, but I had already tried that and failed. We finally left the hospital. Daniel carried me to the car like a baby. I still couldn't walk without pain. At home I saw our wedding photo on the wall. I stared at it for 5 minutes. I removed it and smashed it on the floor. Daniel didn't stop me. I began throwing things. Plates, cups, shoes, my wrapper, anything. Then I sat in the corner shaking, crying. I want justice. I screamed. They destroyed my life. Daniel held me tightly. We'll get justice, he whispered, even if it takes everything I have. And he meant it. Daniel sold his car to hire a lawyer. He filed a case against his father for attempted rape, assault, and mental abuse. He filed another against the church for covering up Pastor Kelvin's behavior over the years. But as the court dates came closer, threats started. One evening, we came home and saw red oil poured across our doorway. A dead pigeon was nailed to the wall. Next day, a letter was slid under our door. Withdraw the case or you both die. Daniel didn't flinch. He read the letter, tore it, and burned it. We're not afraid, he said. But I was. I couldn't sleep that night. Every sound felt like danger. I held a kitchen knife under my pillow. Then Daniel started receiving anonymous calls. They're watching us, he said. Every move. 2 days before the hearing, Daniel's mother called. Please, she said. Don't take your father to court. You'll destroy everything. Daniel replied coldly. He already destroyed everything. Then she said something that froze me. You don't understand. If you expose this, other women will come forward. Other secrets will be revealed. It's bigger than you. That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking, how many other women? How many other girls did that pastor touch? How long has this been going on? I knew I had to speak out, even if my voice shook, even if I bled again. The court day arrived. I wore a long black dress, covered every bruise I could, but the scars inside couldn't be covered. Daniel held my hand as we entered the courtroom. There were journalists, cameras, church members. Some of them hissed at me. Others said I was a liar. Some called me a home destroyer. Mr. James sat beside his lawyer smirking, like he owned the room. Daniel stood and testified first. He told everything. How he walked in. What he saw. What he did. The judge asked, so you're saying your father and your pastor tied your wife and took turns violating her? Yes, Daniel said without blinking. Mr. James' lawyer stood and laughed. Your Honor, he said. This is a made-up story to gain sympathy. My client is a decorated veteran, a father, a church elder. Why would he rape his own daughter-in-law in a church toilet? Then it was my turn. I stood slowly. My legs shook. I gripped the table and faced the judge. I didn't come here for sympathy, I said softly. I came here because the people I trusted the most destroyed me. I told it all. The rope, the cloth in my mouth, the pain, the moment I collapsed. The moment I lost my baby, and the courtroom was silent, dead silent, until Mr. James stood up suddenly and shouted, She wanted it. Gasps filled the room. She was dressing like a prostitute in my house, moving her waist like a snake, he continued. The judge banged the gavel. Enough, Mr. James. Daniel lunged forward, but the officers held him back. The judge turned to the jury. Do you need time to deliberate? The head juror shook his head. We don't, Your Honor. Everyone held their breath. He stood up and said, We find Mr. James guilty of all charges. Screams erupted. Some people clapped. Others shouted. Some cried. Daniel hugged me. Tight. For a long time. Mr. James was sentenced to 20 years in prison. But that victory didn't feel like peace. Because 2 days later, as we were returning from church service, a black car followed us. Before we could run, 3 men jumped out. One of them pulled a gun. Daniel pushed me aside and took the bullet in his chest. Blood sprayed across my face. Daniel fell to the ground with a loud thud. His eyes were wide open, gasping. His hand reached out to me like he didn't want to go. No. I screamed so loud I thought my voice would tear apart my throat. Daniel. Daniel, please. Please don't leave me. He blinked once. The men ran. Tires screeched as their black car disappeared into the night. I dropped to my knees beside him, screaming, shaking, pressing my hands over the hole in his chest. Blood poured like water from a broken pipe. Stay with me. Stay with me. I begged. I didn't care if anyone was watching. I didn't care if I was in the middle of the street. I was losing him. I could feel his warmth leaving. I love you, he whispered. His lips trembled. Always. Then his head dropped sideways, and everything went dark. I don't remember how long I screamed. People gathered. Someone called an ambulance. Someone else pulled me away from his body. I kicked. I screamed. I bit a man's arm. Let me go. That's my husband. That's my husband. They finally took him to the hospital. He was rushed into surgery. I waited. In blood. In pain. In panic. After 4 hours, a doctor came out. He survived. But the bullet fractured 2 ribs and punctured his lung. He's in critical condition. I fell to the floor and cried like a baby. The next few days were a blur. Machines beeped beside Daniel's bed. I sat there holding his hand, whispering to him, telling him stories, singing softly. He couldn't respond, but I saw his fingers twitch. He was fighting. For me. For us. Police came to ask questions. I told them everything. About the car. The 3 men. The timing. It was a hit, one officer whispered. Someone sent them. I knew who. Daniel's own mother never came to the hospital. Not once. Instead, a letter arrived. No name. No sender. It said, let this be your final warning. Stop digging or next time we finish the job. I took the letter to the police. They said they would investigate. But I didn't trust anyone anymore. Daniel stayed in that bed for weeks. He lost weight. His skin got pale. I saw death standing close watching us. But one morning his eyes opened. He whispered, you stayed. I nodded through my tears. He smiled. And that was enough. He recovered slowly. Physically. But something inside him broke. He started to have nightmares. He'd wake up screaming, sweating, shouting his father's name. Or the pastor's. Or mine. Sometimes he'd sit by the window for hours, staring into space. I tried everything. Prayers. Doctors. Therapy. Food. Hugs. But the pain was too deep. One night, I found him writing letters. He didn't know I was watching. I read one later. It said, maybe I'm not meant to have peace. Maybe all I'm good for is revenge. That terrified me. Because I knew he wasn't healing. He was planning something. A month later, he disappeared for 2 days. No phone call. No note. When he returned, he was different. Cold. Quiet. Too quiet. What happened? I asked. Nothing, he said. But there was blood on his shoes. The next morning, we heard on the news. 2 church elders found dead, believed to be close allies of the late Pastor Kelvin. Police suspect foul play. I turned to Daniel. He didn't flinch. He just sipped his tea. Did you? I whispered. He looked at me, and for the first time in our marriage, I saw something in his eyes that scared me. He didn't answer. But deep inside, I knew. Daniel was turning into someone else. Someone darker. Someone that pain had created. He still kissed me every morning. Still said I love you. Still held my hand in bed. But there were nights he'd sneak out. Come back smelling like smoke. Or blood. Or gunpowder. He was chasing shadows. Hunting names I'd never heard of. Trying to take down the whole system that allowed that pastor to rise. I begged him to stop. Let's leave the country, I said. Let's start over. He shook his head. If I leave, they'll do it to another girl. I have to finish this. One night, he kissed me deeply, held me longer than usual. I love you, he said. You saved me more than I ever saved you. Then he walked out. That night, there was an explosion at a private residence. The news said it was a secret gathering of corrupt church leaders. The house burned to ashes. Daniel didn't come back that night. I didn't sleep. In the morning he walked in covered in soot, limping. He dropped to his knees and cried in my arms. I can't keep doing this, he sobbed. I've become the monster I was fighting. I wrapped my arms around him and whispered, then let's heal. Together. Please. That was the beginning of a new chapter for us. He stopped chasing revenge. We moved to a quiet town. We started over. Built a life. And for 40 years we lived. In peace. In love. He never raised his voice at me. Never slept without holding my hand. Never forgot our anniversary. He built me a garden. I cooked his favorite meals. We danced slowly on our veranda every evening. But then one morning, I woke up beside him. I turned to kiss his cheek. And he wasn't breathing. I touched his chest. It was cold. Too cold. I shook him gently. Daniel, love, wake up. It's morning. Nothing. I sat up quickly. My hands trembled. I leaned closer to his mouth. No breath. I pressed my ear to his chest. No heartbeat. Daniel. I screamed. Please wake up. Please don't do this to me. I started pressing on his chest. Counting. Pushing. Crying. He didn't move. He didn't flinch. His hand, the same one that always held mine in sleep, lay limp beside his pillow. I collapsed over him, shaking. Please, we promised. You promised. You said we'd grow old together. You said I'd go first. But Daniel was gone. At age 84, after everything he had survived, gunshot, betrayal, revenge, he left me quietly in his sleep. No warning. No goodbye. Just peace. I sat beside him for hours, holding his hand, crying. I talked to him like he could hear me. I told him all the things I wanted to say one last time. I told him how proud I was. I told him how he saved me from drowning in pain. I told him he was my only peace in this cruel world. And then, I made him a promise. I'll tell our story, I whispered. I'll make sure the world knows who you were. What you did. What we survived. The funeral was simple. No fancy casket. No loud music. Just me, a few neighbors, and one close friend who still remembered what happened all those years ago. I buried him under a tree behind our house. His favorite tree. The one we planted together in our first year of healing. After everyone left, I sat beside his grave. I didn't want to go back into the house. It felt too empty. Too silent. I spoke aloud. You saved me the day you walked into that toilet. And I meant it. Because if Daniel hadn't come that day, I'd be dead. Or worse. I'd be alive, but destroyed beyond repair. Daniel wasn't just my husband. He was my rescue. My avenger. My reason to breathe. And now that he was gone, I felt like I was drowning all over again. Days passed. I barely ate. I didn't speak to anyone. I wore his sweater every night just to feel close. One night, I opened an old box he kept under the bed. Inside I found letters. So many letters. Each written on our anniversary. Each sealed but never given to me. I opened one. My angel. If you're reading this, I'm probably gone. But I want you to know, you were the best part of my life. Not just for saving me, but for forgiving me. For staying. For loving me. Even when I couldn't love myself. I cried so hard I couldn't breathe. Then I opened another. And another. Each one was full of love. Pain. Regret. Healing. And it was in that moment I realized, Daniel had already said goodbye. He knew his time was coming. He had left his love in words. And now it was my turn to live with them. To carry the story. To speak up. So I did. I started telling women in the village. Then at churches. Then at schools. I told them everything. About the pastor. The father-in-law. The pain. The blood. The baby I lost. The revenge. The healing. And most importantly, the man who chose to fight for me. Daniel. Some cried when they heard. Some stayed silent. Some confessed their own stories. And slowly, I began to feel lighter. I still wore his wedding ring. Still slept on his side of the bed. But now, I was no longer a victim. I was a survivor. A widow, yes. But one who loved, who was loved deeply, and who lived to tell the truth. And as I sit here now, at 79 years old, speaking to you, I still remember the way he looked at me that day in the toilet, after everything. The fury in his eyes. The love in his hands. The vow in his heart. And I still whisper to the wind every night. I love you, Daniel. Forever. It's been 5 years since Daniel died. And yet, every morning when I wake up, I still turn to his side of the bed before I remember. Before I remember that it's just me now. Just the silence. Just the echo of our laughter that used to fill this small house. Just the wind whispering through the curtains. Sounding like his voice when he used to call me, Angel. Some days I sit in the garden, where his favorite tree still stands tall and green. I water it like I used to. I speak to it. I tell it everything that happens each day. Because even now, Daniel is all I have. But something changed in me the year after he passed. I began getting letters. First, just one. Then 5. Then dozens. All from women. Some young, some old. All of them broken. Scared. Hiding secrets they thought they'd carry to their graves. One wrote, "Your story saved me. I was assaulted by my uncle when I was 13. I never told anyone. But hearing what you survived gave me courage to speak up." Another wrote, "I thought I was alone. But after I heard what your husband did for you, I believed again that love can protect us." I cried reading each one. But one letter shook me the most. It had no name. Just this. I was your husband's stepsister. He never knew. I was just 9 when your father-in-law first touched me. But nobody believed me. They said I was lying. That I wanted attention. When I heard what happened to you, I wept. Because you were the proof I never had. I held that letter to my chest and screamed. Because that was the moment I understood. It wasn't just about me. Or Daniel. Or what happened in that church toilet. This story, our pain, it belonged to so many others who never got justice. And now Daniel's fight wasn't over. It had become mine. So I started speaking. Anywhere that would listen. Schools. Churches. Marketplaces. I told women, never be silent. I told men, protect her. Not just when it's easy, but when it's hard. I told leaders, stop covering sin with prayer. Some demons wear collars and hold microphones. People called me brave. But I wasn't brave. I was broken. But I refused to stay silent. One day, I was invited to a women's conference in the city. Hundreds of women gathered. I stood on stage, shaking as I held the microphone. But once I opened my mouth, I felt Daniel beside me. I told them everything. From my wedding day, to the toilet, to the rope, to the knife, to the baby I lost, to the bullet Daniel took, to the way he died, peaceful in love. And when I finished, the room was quiet. Then they stood up, one by one, clapping, crying, hugging me. And at the end a young girl, barely 18, came to me and said, "I was going to end my life tomorrow. But now I think I'll fight instead." I hugged her so tight. Because I saw myself in her eyes. The same fear. The same silence. The same wound. But now she had a voice. And that voice came because Daniel gave me mine. I went back home that night. And I cried in my bed. But this time not out of pain. But out of purpose. Daniel may be gone. But what he did lives on in every girl who now dares to speak up. And that's when I decided I would write a book. Our story. From start to finish. No sugar.
No filters.
Just the truth. I titled it, Angel in the Fire. The true story of a wife, a knife and a godless pastor. It sold faster than I ever imagined. Not because it was beautiful, but because it was real. People want the truth. They're tired of the lies churches and families used to cover sin. The truth saved me. Saving others now too. But there's something I still haven't told anyone. Not even the girls who write to me. Not even the church. It's about Daniel's last night. Just before we went to bed, he held my hand tighter than usual. He looked at me and said something that still echoes in my bones. Angel, if I leave first, don't follow me too soon. Live. Laugh. Tell it all. And maybe love again. I hit him playfully and said, You're not going anywhere, old man. We laughed. But he meant it. He knew. And now that I'm alone, sometimes I wonder, should I love again? Can I? Would it even be fair? But I always come back to this. I love Daniel. And I still do. But love doesn't die. It just transforms. And now I pour all that love into helping others survive what I did. So, if you're hearing this now, if you're listening to my voice as I sit in this wooden chair, 79 years old, with shaking fingers and tired eyes, please know, you are not alone. You are not weak. And the people who hurt you don't get the final say. You do. The court case began with heavy tension in the air. Cameras, police escorts, and angry church members were everywhere. My heart pounded as I stood by my husband's side. I looked at the courtroom door, and my father-in-law and Pastor Samuel were brought in with handcuffs. My stomach twisted. They looked different now. Not holy. Not respected. Not powerful. Just two men caught in their shame. But that didn't stop them from turning things around. My son is mentally unstable, my father-in-law shouted in court. He has a long history of violent behavior. He's using his wife's lies to destroy us. And then Pastor Samuel added with his fake tears, This is the devil trying to scatter the church of God. I never touched her. I raised her like a daughter. The whole courtroom turned to look at me. I felt like a criminal, not the victim. I stood up and raised my voice. They both tied me in the toilet. They beat me. They abused me together. My husband caught them red-handed. I still have blood in my body from what they did. Look at the medical reports. Look at the photos. Some people cried. Some shouted that I was lying. Some church members fell to the floor, praying in tongues. The judge tried to calm the court. But my husband stood. Strong. Bold. My wife is not lying, he said. I saw it with my own eyes. If any of you defend these two men, may your daughters suffer the same fate. I regret ever respecting them. That moment changed the trial. The lawyer brought out evidence. Phone recordings. Photos. My hospital reports. Everything was there. But just when it looked like victory was near, the judge paused and said, There's a problem with the evidence submission. The USB drive has been tampered with. It's empty. We all froze. Even my husband. I whispered, What does this mean? Our lawyer looked helpless. The case was now hanging by a thread. Suddenly, someone ran into the courtroom breathless. And what he held in his hand changed everything. The young man who ran into the courtroom was someone I barely recognized. His face was thin, his eyes tired, but his hands trembled as he held up a phone and a small bag of documents. I have the real evidence, he shouted. I used to work as a janitor in the church. I saw everything. I was threatened, but I can't hold it anymore. God won't forgive me if I stay silent. Gasps filled the courtroom. Even Pastor Samuel's eyes widened in panic. The judge ordered the bailiff to collect the items. Within minutes, the court projector played a video recorded secretly. The footage was grainy but clear enough. It showed Pastor Samuel pulling me by my hair into a back room of the church. His words angry and disgusting. My cries. My struggle. And in the background, my father-in-law's voice urging him on. People screamed. Some fainted. Some shouted curses. Others, who once defended Pastor Samuel, now covered their faces in shame. The judge pounded his gavel for silence. This is undeniable, he said firmly. This is not only a spiritual betrayal but a criminal act of the highest order. Pastor Samuel dropped to his knees crying fake tears. My enemies have won. My enemies have. Silence, the judge barked. My father-in-law tried to limp his way to the stand. I'm old. I was deceived. My son has always hated me. But the judge had heard enough. I hereby sentence Pastor Samuel to life imprisonment for multiple counts of rape, assault, and psychological torture, and Chief Johnson for conspiracy and abuse of position, 25 years imprisonment. The courtroom exploded again, but this time with cheers. My husband broke down in tears. I just stood still, like my spirit had left my body. After everything, justice had come. But why did I still feel so broken? Later that night, as we walked out of court, people surrounded us. Reporters. Women crying. Survivors. Supporters. Everyone saying, "Thank you." But that night, I sat alone in our bedroom. My body had healed, but my soul? I looked at my reflection in the mirror and whispered, "Who am I now?" Then I heard a knock. I opened the door, and who stood there shocked me to the bone. Standing at the door was my mother. The woman who abandoned me when I was just 6 years old. Her eyes were sunken, her skin wrinkled from time and hardship, but I recognized her immediately. I didn't know whether to scream, hug her, or slam the door shut. "Betty," she whispered, her voice shaking. "I've been following the court case from afar. I had to come." Tears burned my eyes. "You left me." I snapped. "You left me with a man who beat me. You never came back." "I know," she cried. "I deserved every punishment life gave me. But I heard everything. What your husband's father and your pastor did to you. And I knew I had no right, but I had to at least beg for your forgiveness." I staggered back, trembling. The weight of my past had just crushed me in court. And now, the ghost of my childhood pain returned. My husband appeared behind me and gently touched my shoulder. "Maybe you should talk," he said softly. "Maybe healing starts here too." So I invited her in. She sat nervously, her hands shaking. She told me stories I never knew. How my father had abused her too. How she tried to take me but was threatened with death. How she had no money, no help, and ran to survive. But she never stopped praying for me. We cried together. For the first time in over 60 years, I allowed her to hold me again. It didn't heal everything, but something cracked open. Later that night, I sat outside and looked up at the stars. My scars would never fully fade, but I had survived. I had fought. I had exposed evil. I had found my voice. And for the first time in a long time, I felt like Grandma Betty again. But just as I was about to head back inside, I got a call that froze my blood. "Grandma Betty, they've escaped from prison." My hands trembled as I held the phone to my ear. "They escaped?" I whispered. "Yes," the officer said grimly. "Your husband's father. The pastor too. They overpowered the guards and vanished. We don't know where they are yet, but you need protection, Grandma Betty." I dropped the phone. The past, the horror I thought I had buried in that courtroom, was now clawing its way back into my life. At 82 years old, I was still not safe. I locked every window, every door. The house was silent, too silent. My husband tried to comfort me, but even he was shaken. That night, I didn't sleep. At 2 a.m., I heard a creak at the back door. Then, a whisper. "Betty." I froze. It was the voice. His voice. The monster who raised my husband, the man who beat me for years, was outside. My soul wanted to collapse in fear, but something inside me, something strong, rose instead. I walked to the door. My hands no longer shook. I had survived rape, beatings, betrayal, child loss, poverty, and pain. I was no longer the helpless girl they tormented. I was Grandma Betty. I opened the door with a bat in my hand. There he was. Old, frail, but still wearing that evil grin. He stepped forward. "I told you I would break you." And I swung. Hard. He fell backward, bleeding from his forehead. Police sirens wailed in the distance. My husband had called them just in time. The pastor was found hiding in the woods nearby. They were both dragged away, this time for good. 1 month later, I stood at the same church that once buried my child. But this time it wasn't a funeral. It was a celebration. I started an organization to protect abused girls. We named it Betty's Voice, because too many women lose their voices. But I didn't. My scars remain, but I wear them with pride. I am 82. I have lived through hell, but I lived, and I will never be silent again.
Thank you for listening to this story, my dear ones. If this story touched your heart, please subscribe to Grandma's Tales. Like the video and share your thoughts in the comments. Tell us where you're listening from. I love hearing from each and every one of you. Until we meet again in another story, stay strong, stay kind, and remember, you are never alone.